In this YouTube vlog, we delve into Anya Lumba's groundbreaking work, Sexuality and Racial Difference in Gender, Race, and Renaissance Drama. Lumba's insightful analysis challenges conventional understandings of gender and race in Renaissance drama. Through her exploration of texts by Shakespeare, Jonson, and others, Lumba illuminates how early modern theatre both reflected and shaped perceptions of sexuality and race. Join us as we unpack Lumba's key arguments and their relevance to contemporary discussions on gender, race, and identity. Anya Lumba. Anya Lumba is a prominent scholar known for her work in post-colonial studies, feminist theory, and early modern literature. She is a professor of English at the University of Pennsylvania. Lumba's research focuses on the intersections of gender, race, and colonialism, particularly in the context of early modern England and colonial India. Her work often challenges traditional narratives and seeks to uncover marginalized voices and perspectives in literature and history. Lumba is the author of several influential books, including Colonialism, Post-Colonialism, and Gender, Race, Renaissance Drama. She is also known for her edited collections and critical essays that have contributed significantly to post-colonial and feminist studies. Sexuality and Racial Difference, Gender, Race, Renaissance Drama. Anya Lumba's book, Sexuality and Racial Difference, Gender, Race, Renaissance Drama, is a pioneering work that examines the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality in Renaissance drama. Lumba explores how these categories are constructed and represented in early modern English plays, challenging traditional scholarly approaches that have often overlooked these complex intersections. One of the key themes of the book is the exploration of how race and gender intersect in the portrayal of characters and relationships in Renaissance drama. Lumba argues that the representation of race and gender in these plays reflects broader social and political concerns of the time, including issues of power, identity, and cultural difference. Lumba also examines how Renaissance drama engages with colonial discourses, particularly in its portrayal of non-European characters and cultures. She argues that these plays often reflect and reinforce colonial ideologies, while also providing spaces for critique and resistance. Sexuality and Racial Difference, Gender, Race, Renaissance drama is a significant contribution to the fields of Renaissance studies, post-colonial studies, and gender studies. It provides a nuanced and insightful analysis of how race, gender, and sexuality intersect in early modern drama, offering new perspectives on these complex issues. Overview of Sexuality and Racial Difference, Gender, Race, Renaissance Drama. Anya Lumba discusses the following perspectives in her seminal work. Mains Power, Historicizing Racism, Ravenous Tigers and Inhuman Dogs, Racism Patriarchism, Constructing the Other, Happily for I Am Black, Desdemona's Disobedience, Desdemona's Obedience. Mains Power. The violence depicted in Renaissance and Jacobean tragedy, particularly the violence against women, resonates strongly with female Indian readers. This violence is not just historical but also has contemporary relevance, challenging traditional criticism and simplistic first-world feminism. The play's depiction of violence against women parallels the violence experienced by women in India, including dowry deaths, rapes, and sexual exploitation. These issues are not only part of the daily lives of many women in India but are also escalating. The practices of female infanticide and sati, widow immolation, persist, despite efforts to abolish them. In rural areas, women are still persecuted and even killed on accusations of witchcraft. These examples highlight the constant vulnerability of women to patriarchal and class violence in India. It is crucial to contextualize these facts within the history of Western narratives about non-European women, which often portray them as pitiable and their societies as barbaric. Indian feminists emphasize the need to analyze the oppression of women in India within the framework of modern Indian society and its contemporary contradictions, rather than viewing it as a relic of a feudal past. In the context of institutionalized readings of Renaissance tragedy, we see a pattern of female transgression being harshly suppressed by various authorities such as the family, state, church, and judiciary. Characters like Desdemona in Othello, the Duchess of Malfi, Victoria in The White Devil, Bianca in Women Beware Women, Annabella in 'Tis Pity She's a Whore, and Beatrice Joanna in The Changeling. All defy societal norms of female behavior and face severe consequences. This reflects the historical reality of early modern Europe, where many women were persecuted as witches, illustrating how the label witch was used to condemn any form of female deviance or rebellion. The theory of the spiritual chaos of Jacobean drama suggested a link between female disobedience and a corrupt social order. This connection served to suppress any ideas of disobedience that real women readers might entertain. In the Indian educational context, this theory imposes universal models of human relationships on subaltern readers, disregarding their lived experiences. For example, at Miranda House, Delhi, undergraduates who questioned Desdemona's silence in Othello were met with arguments that suggested her passivity was a universal trait in romantic love. This imposition of Western narrative ideals, such as romantic love, on Indian readers ignores the nuances of their own cultural experiences. The portrayal of women in both high and low literature reinforces conventional beliefs about women in love. This is evident in the narrative syntax that depicts the subordination of women to domestic roles and their diminishing ability to express themselves articulately. For instance, a passage from Barbara Cartland's Lord Ravenscar's Revenge is cited. That is what I felt, Romara said, but I never thought, I never dreamt that would feel the same. p.to61, where a female character struggles to articulate her feelings, reinforcing the idea of a woman's subordination in love and relationships. In India, many college students grapple with conflicting ideals of romantic love, free choice, and sexual passion, which are often nurtured by popular cinema but clash with the reality of arranged marriages and societal expectations of female obedience. Desdemona's initial defiance of her father in Othello resonates with these ideals, but her subsequent submissiveness betrays them. This contradiction often leads to discomfort among students, who see Desdemona's fate, being murdered, as uncomfortably similar to the plight of battered wives in contemporary Indian society, especially in urban areas. A recent Indian feminist interpretation of Shakespearean plays, including Othello, as spectacles of wife murder can be seen as a response to these similarities. This interpretation challenges readers to question rather than accept Desdemona's silencing and situates it within the daily experiences of Indian women. Reading Othello as a black woman introduces complexities that challenge the notion of mains power and disrupts comparisons with other characters or situations. It becomes difficult to accept that Othello's experiences and words could be easily equated with those of a white character like Claudio. Western feminist interpretations have often focused on love, particularly marital love, as the central theme of the play, framing the conflict as one between men and women. However, if we delve deeper into how male violence is depicted in the play, we can critique not just the silencing of women but also expose other forms of violence and silences. Viewing Othello through this lens reveals its more complex resonance in both the Indian context and the Western classroom. The character of Othello, when not reduced to a universal man devoid of racial identity, can be seen as embodying a unique intersection of forces, complicating simplistic readings of love and hate. Christopher Norris suggests that Othello's criticism, from Samuel Johnson to F. R. Lewis, can be viewed as part of a dominant cultural formation in the history of Shakespeare studies. It can be seen as an attempt to contain the unruly energies of the text and impose a stable order of significance, achieved through the exclusion of both gender and race. This exclusion leads to misunderstandings and misrepresentations of the women in the play, as highlighted by feminist critiques. Additionally, critical commentaries have largely ignored the question of race in Othello. Thomas Rymer's interpretation of the play in 1693 reflects a patriarchal view of female obedience and a racist warning against the sexuality of black men. This interpretation prioritized the submission of women of higher social status. Leslie Fiedler, in more recent times, acknowledges the connection between racial and sexual themes in the play. He suggests that Othello transitions from being a cultural outsider to a colorless figure, symbolizing a downfall from his initial status as a black man. Fiedler holds Desdemona, referred to as the White Witch, and Iago, the true black, jointly responsible for Othello's downfall. Emilia is portrayed as an untamed shrew, and the women in general are seen to reinforce Iago's negative view of women. Carol Neely criticized Leslie Fiedler's misogyny but fails to address his racism, which, although less overt than earlier critics like Thomas Rymer, is still present in his analysis. Neely also does not analyze the impact of Othello's blackness on the sexual dynamics of the play. Focusing solely on sexual difference while neglecting the racial aspect results in a limited understanding of the human condition, particularly for women in the Third World who face both gender and racial oppression. While the question of race has been discussed more prominently in recent scholarship, it is often overlooked or downplayed even by critics focused on alternative and political interpretations. Fully integrating discussions of race into analysis of gender differences is essential for a comprehensive understanding of the play's themes and implications. Ben Okri suggests that reducing the significance of Othello's race diminishes the impact of his character and the complexities of sexual dynamics in the play. Othello's blackness is integral to understanding both male and female sexuality and power structures within the play. The intertwining of sexuality and race in Othello's character profoundly influences both aspects, revealing the complex histories of authority and resistance. This interweaving does not resolve the tensions between different forms of oppression but instead acknowledges and addresses them. It also highlights the schisms and discontinuities of identity, which are often foregrounded in Renaissance drama but are frequently overlooked in discussions of racial difference. Historicizing racism. Historicizing racism in the context of Othello reveals the struggles of critics to reconcile Othello's blackness with his central role in the play. Some critics ignored his race altogether, while others tried to argue that Shakespeare did not intend Othello to be black. Both approaches are rooted in racist notions of black inferiority. The idea that all men are the same coexists with the belief that blacks are inferior and hardly men at all. Attempts to prove Othello's non-Negroid racial origins, as seen in Ridley's writings, are blatantly racist. Ridley suggests that Othello's blackness should not be seen as a reason for him to look subhuman to European eyes. This argument reflects a deeply ingrained belief in the inferiority of black people. Additionally, some critics argue that since miscegenation had not yet been invented in Elizabethan England, Othello's blackness should be seen as symbolic rather than as an ethnic distinction. However, this argument overlooks the fact that racial categories and the associated moral connotations were already present in early modern Europe. The history of racism involves the process by which certain colors, particularly blackness, became associated with moral and ethical qualities. This association is not inherent but constructed through historical and cultural processes, highlighting the complexity of racial discourse in Shakespeare's time and its impact on interpretations of Othello. During Elizabethan times, there was a strong and ancient tradition associating black-faced men with wickedness, which persisted into Shakespeare's era. This tradition was influenced by a Bible-centered worldview that graded humanity based on its geographical distance from the Holy Land. Black people were considered devilish because they existed outside the physical and conceptual realms of Christianity. This association stemmed partly from the belief that blackness was a direct consequence of sexual excess, linking blacks to the descendants of Ham. In this worldview, the devil and his associates were often portrayed as black, as seen in Reginald Scott's The Discovery of Witchcraft, which suggested that a damaged soul could take the shape of a blackamoor. This link between blackness and wickedness was deeply ingrained in the cultural and religious beliefs of the time, influencing perceptions of race and morality. G.K. Hunter suggests that a general cultural hostility to strangers influenced racial prejudice, attributing this to a response to the antinomy of day and night, which he believes explains the presence of racism worldwide. However, this view dangerously universalizes and naturalizes white racism, overlooking the varied and complex histories of racial oppression. Eldred Jones' study, Othello's Countrymen, demonstrates that Shakespeare did not rely solely on literary sources for his portrayal of black characters. There was a growing black presence in England during Shakespeare's time, evidenced by increasing contact between black and white inhabitants. For instance, Richard Hakluyt's Principal Navigations documents the early stages of the slave trade, including John Hawkins' activities between 1562 and 1568, during which he brought black slaves to England and sold them to Spain. This resulted in several hundred black individuals living in the households of the aristocracy and landed gentry in England. G.K. Hunter's arguments that Elizabethans had no continuous contact with black people and no sense of economic threat from them have been historically disproved. The black presence in Elizabethan England was perceived and constructed as a threat by the state. Royal proclamations and state papers nervously pointed to the great numbers of Negroes and blackamoors in the country, which was seen as problematic. Queen Elizabeth's correspondence with the Privy Council, where she sought to deport 89 black people, is significant in this regard. A warrant issued on 18 July 1596 contrasts black or those kinds of people with her white subjects or Christian people, illustrating an Orientalist split between a superior European culture and inferior non-European peoples and cultures. This split, as Edward Said argued in Orientalism, is crucial in establishing the hegemony of the former. Elizabeth's communication also argues that blacks would create unemployment or want of service for her white people. She evokes the myth of rampant black sexuality and their populous numbers, seeking to limit and control the black presence in the imperial country. The echoes of past prejudices in today's immigration and deportation laws are not accidental but are the result of a continuous reworking of earlier prejudices in later relations of dominance. Cedric Robinson discusses how the ideologies of earlier feudal relations were preserved and transformed in the new mercantile and colonial situations. He notes that the identification of blacks with evil was not only directed against strangers but also served to maintain the superiority of the upper classes. The European nobility projected itself as being distinct from the common people, who were often seen as foreigners, including traveling merchants. Robinson argues that racism was not simply a result of capitalism but that capitalism itself was profoundly shaped by ideas of racial differentiation. While the ideal of a unified Greater Britain was encouraged, the tendency of European civilization through capitalism was not to homogenize but to differentiate, exaggerating regional and subcultural dialectical differences into racial ones. This process served to maintain and reinforce existing power structures and hierarchies, particularly about class and ethnicity. In a similar vein, a tendency can be traced in the case of women, where increasing restrictions upon their activities, inheritance, and public participation accompanied the widening separation of the centers of production and consumption. This occurred even as the dominant ideology posited the notion of women as a more equal companion to men. Women, along with other marginalized peoples, were excluded from the projected ideals of self-fulfillment, self-fashioning, personal achievement, and mobility. Sexual difference became a central preoccupation of religious and secular authority. These exclusions opened up irreconcilable contradictions regarding women as well as marginalized groups. In both cases, medieval differentiations were not simply adopted but modified and altered in the new circumstances, reflecting the changing dynamics of power, authority, and social structures. The definition of black, supplied by a pre-16th century version of the Oxford English Dictionary as deeply stained with dirt, having dark or deadly purposes, malignant, was useful beyond medieval religious and cultural chauvinism. Cedric Robinson attributes this chauvinism to the failure of the project of a greater or unified Europe during the 11th and 12th centuries, and its transference from one of terrestrial social order to that of a spiritual kingdom, Christendom. The new knowledge about foreign peoples generated by Renaissance expeditions was filtered through and shaped by existing ideologies and prejudices. Winthrop D. Jordan suggests that the linkage between blacks and the devil represented a projection onto the African of the bourgeoisie's anxieties about their role as entrepreneurs in the burgeoning capitalist developments that threatened to disrupt the social order. Racist ideologies are not solely constructed to rationalize the economic aspects of colonial plunder, but this rationalization is certainly a crucial component of them. The common-sense attitudes towards black people in Othello indicate both the older tradition of hatred towards blacks and a newer expediency, a more complex ideology of racism. While the attitudes of modern audiences and readers may not be identical to those of Shakespeare's original audiences, and the play's readership is not a unified category, Indians among them have experienced a different history of racism. Nevertheless, contemporary color prejudices are interlinked, they draw upon and rework this earlier history. There is a historical dependency between patriarchalism and racism. In Europe, the increased emphasis on the heterogeneity of peoples and groupings occurs alongside the escalation of patriarchal discourses on the separateness of female identity from the masculine. In the Indian subcontinent, the consolidation of power involved racial, sexual, and caste exclusions. In the colonies, racism specifically called out the basic sexist tendencies in the colonized countries and cultures, calcified existing ones and introduced others, see Ogundiplesly. Helen Carr points out that colonialist racist and sexist discourse have continually reinforced, naturalized and legitimized each other during the process of European colonization, p. 46. Although the specificity of racism and patriarchy should not be blurred by this analogy, the connections are important. Both women and racial others are posited as biological and natural inferiors, and similar characteristics are attributed to them. In the language of colonialism, non-Europeans occupy the same symbolic space as women. Both are seen as part of nature, not culture, and with the same ambivalence, either they are ripe for government, passive, childlike, unsophisticated, needing leadership and guidance, described always in terms of lack, no initiative, no intellectual powers, no perseverance, or on the other hand, they are outside society, dangerous, treacherous, emotional, inconstant, wild, threatening, fickle, sexually aberrant, irrational, near animal, lascivious, disruptive, evil, unpredictable, Carr, p. 50. Thus, the operations of patriarchalism seek to extend the control and authority of man as father over women, and white man as father over black men and women. Both black people and women need guidance, yet both threaten to elude and disrupt it. Ravenous tigers and inhuman dogs. Cowhick points out that recognizing the familiarity of the figure of the black man as a villain in Elizabethan drama is crucial to understanding the impact of a black hero on Shakespeare's audience. Shakespeare departed significantly from his source material, other representations of blacks on the Renaissance stage, and even from his own earlier portrayals of Moors. The tradition of the black villain hero in Elizabethan drama had resulted in a series of negative portrayals of black men, such as Mulli Mahomet in Thomas Peele's The Battle of Alcazar or Elisa in Lust's Dominion, written by Dekker and others. In Shakespeare's Love's Labour's Lost, black is described as the badge of hell, the hue of dungeons, and the school of the night, 4:50-1. In Cinthio's version of the Othello story, Othello's blackness already displeases Desdemona, and Othello carefully plots how to murder her without being caught. Hunter points out that Shakespeare changes many features of Cinthio's tale, but not the color of the hero. A brief look at Shakespeare's earlier, fullest treatment of race in Titus Andronicus reveals the extent to which Othello departs from the usual linkage of black men with deviant white women. In Titus Andronicus, the queen, Thamora, and the character Aaron are portrayed as lovers and accomplices in unleashing a tale of murders, rapes, and massacres, acts of black night, abominable deeds, complots of mischief, treason, villainies. They are depicted almost interchangeably, with each being separately referred to as a ravenous tiger. The play's recurrent horrors stem from a savage struggle for Roman imperial power, recently consolidated by a victory over the barbarous Goths, but projected onto the others of Roman imperial patriarchy. In Titus Andronicus, the Roman nobility is portrayed as both masculine and civilized, with Titus as its grand patriarch. His status is derived from his military exploits and the valor of his sons, most of whom have died in battle. Lavinia, his daughter, is praised for her beauty and virtue, seen as Rome's ornament. However, Rome is depicted as a wilderness of tigers due to the ruler's disregard for the people and their brutal traditions. Thamora highlights Rome's barbarity, comparing it unfavorably to Scythia. In this context, a black man and a disorderly woman serve as convenient scapegoats for the city's problems. In Titus Andronicus, there is no debate about the ethnicity of Aaron the Moor, unlike in Othello, as Aaron more easily fits the stereotype of black wickedness, lust, and malignity. His unmitigated evil is repeatedly linked to his physical features, such as his fleece of woolly hair that he compares to an adder ready to strike. Aaron himself associates his soul's darkness with the color of his face. Thamora, Aaron's lover, is white but is depicted as barbarous because she is a god. In contrast to Lavinia, who is portrayed as civilized, gracious, gentle, virtuous, chaste, and obedient, Thamora is characterized as insatiable, luxurious, and a siren. While Lavinia is enclosed by Roman patriarchy through her relationships with male family members, Thamora challenges this patriarchal order by waging war against Rome, manipulating its ruler, and maintaining a lover who is also considered barbarous. Thamora becomes the agent of Lavinia's destruction, along with Aaron, who is described as the chief architect and plotter of their woes. Thamora's characterization combines attributes of the warrior woman and the Amazon, displaying masculine prowess, military skill, and usurping male authority. Despite her depiction as a destructive force, Thamora's character is complex and does not fit a simple image of maternal destructiveness or subservience. In Titus Andronicus, both Thamora and Aaron are portrayed as embodiments of pure evil, with their liaison motivated by the supposed uncontrollable sexuality of women and blacks. Aaron's blackness is repeatedly associated with evil, as seen in the lines questioning why Thamora, a white woman, would be accompanied by a barbarous Moor, if not for foul desire guiding her. Their child is depicted as a devil, emphasizing the monstrous nature attributed to mixed-race offspring. Ultimately, evil is exposed and purged, with Aaron sentenced to be fed to beasts and birds of prey, while Thamora is also condemned to a violent end. In contrast, Lavinia, the compliant and virtuous woman, is to be embraced within the bosom of the civilized world, symbolized by being closed in a household's monument. However, her rape has rendered her impure and unfit to live, highlighting the tragic fate of women who are victimized in patriarchal societies. In Titus Andronicus, evil is officially located outside Roman patriarchy, yet the play suggests that Rome itself is a place of cruelty and tyranny. Thamora's rise to power after being adopted into Roman society reflects a shift towards terror and tyranny. Similarly, Titus, who sought to incorporate himself in the people's suffrages, becomes a tyrant who tyrannizes over others. Despite their roles in the tragedy, both Thamora and Titus are shown to be responsible for the deaths of their children. However, Aaron, the black character, defies stereotypes by displaying human emotions and sacrificing himself to save his child. He even claims superiority over his white adversaries, challenging the notion that blackness is inferior. Aaron's defense of his child and assertion of his own worth challenge stereotypes of black barbarity. Similarly, Thamora's actions and Titus' descent into tyranny disrupt the simplistic portrayal of female deviance. These disruptions to stereotypes suggest a more complex understanding of race and gender in the play, setting the stage for a deeper exploration in Othello. Racism, patriarchism. In Othello, the protagonist undergoes a transformation from an honorary white within Venetian society to a complete outsider, marginalized and alienated. This transformation is influenced by both racial and sexual differences. Initially, Othello tries to conform to the white Venetian society's ideology, but his relationship with Desdemona disrupts this integration and exposes the contradictions in his self-image. Othello's final speech highlights his internal conflict, where he embodies contradictory identities, Christian and infidel, Venetian and Turk, keeper of the state and its opponent. This internal conflict reflects his near-schizophrenic state, departing from the unified subject typically associated with humanist thought. Desdemona, initially seen as Othello's ally in securing his white status, eventually becomes his sexual and racial other. She, too, is a complex character with various roles in the play, including being Othello's other and also challenging the norms of Venetian patriarchy. This transformation of Othello and Desdemona's evolving roles in the play demonstrates the complex interplay of race, gender, and power dynamics, ultimately leading to their tragic fates. In Othello, the central conflict is not simply between racism and patriarchy, nor is it solely between men and women. Instead, it is a complex interplay of these forces, particularly as they manifest in the relationship between a black man, a white woman, and the state. Othello's blackness is repeatedly highlighted in racist terms, such as thick lips, old black ram, and lascivious Moor, especially in the context of his relationship with Desdemona, which triggers strong reactions from characters like Brabantio and Iago. Brabantio's accusation that Othello used magic to win Desdemona not only ostracizes Othello as a barbaric outsider but also associates him with activities traditionally linked to women, such as witchcraft. This association with femininity further undermines Othello's status in Venetian society. Similarly, Cleopatra, accused of using her feminine wiles to enchant Antony, is portrayed as uncivilized and unchristian due to her Egyptian heritage, reinforcing the stereotype that women like Cleopatra and Othello are inherently threatening due to their perceived sexual allure and foreignness. Constructing the other. The ambiguity surrounding Othello's precise origins, whether he was black, brown, or mulatto, reflects a larger issue of how the other is constructed in Orientalist and colonial discourses. attempts to recover the possibility of Othello's whiteness from this ambiguity miss the point, as his identity as a Moor and a non-white person is crucial to understanding his character in the context of the play. Each non-white race or group has its own unique identity, but in the eyes of colonial discourse, they are all grouped as outsiders, differentiated from white civilization. This uniformity is imposed upon them by their common exclusion from the dominant white culture. As Cedric Robinson notes, the term barbarian was historically used as a function of exclusion rather than reflecting any significant consolidation among these peoples. Therefore, considering Othello as a black man is not about glossing over textual confusion but about recognizing how colonial discourse erases differentiation between its various subjects and treats all outsiders as essentially the same. In understanding racism in the play, it is important to focus on the common exclusion of its others, rather than getting caught up in the precise shade of non-whiteness attributed to them. Othello's conversion from outsider to a valuable member of the dominant culture, whether as a Christian warrior or an exotic colonial subject in the service of the state, reflects a common theme in the European encounter with other peoples, as discussed by Said in Orientalism. In the play, Othello is seen as a valuable asset to Venetian patriarchy, particularly as a warrior against the Turkish threat. In the Senate scene, the Venetian patriarchy demonstrates its ability to construct, co-opt, and exclude its others as needed. Brabantio initially believes that the Senate will support his opposition to Othello's marriage, but the Senate's decision to accept Othello is not so much a display of liberalism as it is a strategic inclusion based on the immediate political context of the Turkish threat. Othello is included as one of us in opposition to the Turkish they, highlighting the complex dynamics of inclusion and exclusion in colonial encounters. Iago's motives in Othello have been the subject of much debate, with some critics viewing them as irrational and evidence of his almost mythic, hardly human wickedness. One such passage often cited is when Iago expresses his motivations for his actions, stating that his love for Desdemona is not out of absolute lust but partly to seek revenge against Othello for suspecting that Othello has slept with his wife, Emilia. This passage is often seen as illogical, as Iago's desire for revenge seems disproportionate to the perceived offense. Now I do love her too, not out of absolute lust, though peradventure I stand accountant for as great a sin, but partly led to diet my revenge, for that I do suspect the lustful Moor. Heart leaped into my seat, the thought whereof doth like a poisonous mineral gnaw my inwards, and nothing can, nor shall content my soul, till I am evenly with him, wife for wife. However, it's important to note that Iago's motives can also be understood in a more complex light. His actions can be seen as stemming from a deep-seated resentment and jealousy towards Othello, as well as a desire for power and control. Iago's manipulation of those around him, including Othello, Desdemona, and Cassio, is driven by his sense of inadequacy and his need to assert his superiority over others. In this sense, Iago's motives may not be entirely irrational but rather rooted in his twisted logic and his desire to assert control over his own life and circumstances. Iago's love for Desdemona is not a conventional or genuine form of love but rather a twisted expression of possessiveness and a desire for power. He sees Desdemona as belonging to him, not to Othello, due to his racist and patriarchal beliefs. In Iago's mind, as a white woman, Desdemona should be under the control and protection of white men like himself, and he feels threatened by the idea of her being with a black man like Othello. The mention of suspecting Emilia with Othello can be seen as part of Iago's manipulative tactics rather than a genuine suspicion. By mentioning this suspicion, Iago is trying to justify his actions and manipulate Othello's emotions further. It serves as a way for Iago to portray himself as a victim of circumstances and to fuel Othello's jealousy and anger. Iago's love for Desdemona is a reflection of his distorted worldview and his desire to exert control and power over others, particularly in a racially charged context. Lawrence's observation about the differing perceptions of sexual relations between black men and white women versus white men and black women highlights a deeply ingrained racism and patriarchal control over sexuality. In colonial contexts, the rape of black women by white men was often seen as a form of domination and control, extending the power of white men over all women. However, the idea of white women being involved with black men was considered threatening, as it was seen as a potential erosion of white territory and an invasion of white purity. This fear of racial pollution and the preservation of the white race is reflected in literature and societal attitudes, where the idea of British women having relationships with Indian men is portrayed as horrific and taboo. This fear is deeply rooted in colonial history and continues to influence contemporary racial dynamics, as seen in the reluctance to accept interracial relationships involving white women. Fanon's psychoanalytical explanation adds another layer to this fear, suggesting that racist phobia reduces the black man to a sexual threat, particularly to white women. The fear of losing control over female sexuality and the idea of the black man introducing white women to a sexual universe beyond the father's control underscores the deeply entrenched racism and patriarchal attitudes that shape perceptions of interracial relationships. Happily for I Am Black. Othello's character is indeed a complex study of the intersection of race and society. At the beginning of the play, he appears to have successfully integrated into Venetian society, earning respect and admiration for his military prowess and achievements. However, his status as an honorary white is precarious, as it relies on his exceptional qualities and accomplishments to overcome the racial prejudice of the time. Othello's understanding of his position is evident in his need to assert his worth and merit, emphasizing his services to the state and his noble lineage. He believes that his actions and character should speak louder than any racial prejudice, confident that his parts, title, and perfect soul will prove his worth. However, as the play unfolds, Othello's confidence is eroded by the manipulations of Iago and the doubts sown about his marriage to Desdemona. The play ultimately exposes the fragility of Othello's position in Venetian society, highlighting the pervasive nature of racial prejudice and the limitations imposed by societal norms. Despite his accomplishments, Othello's blackness marks him as an outsider, subject to the same stereotypes and discrimination that plagued black individuals in the 16th century and beyond. Othello's character is indeed complex, and his experiences reflect broader societal issues beyond just race. His journey involves social mobility and self-fashioning, but within a framework that includes class dynamics and struggles for power. Brecht's observation about Othello's possession of Desdemona and his position as general highlights the intertwined nature of personal and social hierarchies in the play. Othello's rise to the general position is not based on hereditary privilege but on merit and achievement. However, this also means that his position is constantly under threat, as it can be taken away if he fails to defend it. In this context, Othello's relationship with Desdemona can be seen as reflecting broader power dynamics. Their relationship is not just a romantic one but also a reflection of the societal norms and expectations of the time, where women were often seen as property or objects to be controlled by men. Othello's character and his story are not just about race but also about the complexities of power, class, and social dynamics in Renaissance society. Iago's jealousy is indeed a key motivator for his actions throughout the play. He is envious of Cassio's promotion, which he believes he deserves, and he is resentful of Othello's success and position. This jealousy fuels his desire for revenge and his manipulative schemes. Iago's ability to deceive and manipulate others, including Rodrigo, highlights his cunning nature. He can exploit Rodrigo's feelings for Desdemona and use him as a pawn in his larger plan to bring down Othello. His reference to the jewels given to Rodrigo underscores his deceitful nature, as he manipulates Rodrigo for his financial gain. Hall's perspective on race as a modality through which class relations are experienced can be applied to Othello's situation, revealing the complex interplay between race, class, and gender in the play. Iago's jealousy of Cassio's promotion is not simply a matter of personal ambition but is deeply intertwined with racial dynamics. Othello, as a racial outsider who has achieved high social status, embodies a threat to Iago's position. This threat intensifies Iago's feelings of racial inferiority, leading to his hatred and manipulation of Othello. Greenblatt's idea of colonial ideology shaping Iago's actions aligns with this interpretation, suggesting that Iago's ability to control events and people stems from his internalization of colonialist beliefs. These beliefs not only sustain indirect forms of oppression but also fuel Iago's vendetta against Othello, highlighting the intricate connections between race, power, and individual psychology in the play. Desdemona's role in Othello's life is multifaceted. She is not only a symbol of his success and upward mobility but also a gateway to acceptance into white society. Unlike Bianca in Women Beware Women, Desdemona represents more than just a lover or a means to an end. She is a validation of Othello's worth and identity. Her choice of him over the other Venetian men becomes the ultimate proof of his value, surpassing his lineage or military achievements. Othello's reliance on Desdemona's love as a measure of his worth is evident in his statements such as, "My life upon her faith," and, "When I love thee not, chaos comes again." His identity and sense of self are intricately tied to her affection, and he views her love as essential to his existence. Fanon's description of the desire of a black man to be validated through the love of a white woman resonates with Othello's relationship with Desdemona. The idea that being loved by a white woman confirms his worthiness of white love, and by extension, his worthiness of being loved like a white man reflects Othello's deep-seated desire for acceptance and validation in a society where his race sets him apart. Othello's complex relationship with his identity is evident in his efforts to both emphasize and downplay his differences to win Desdemona. He uses his exotic background, cultural and religious differences, and heroic exploits to woo her, highlighting his unique qualities. However, he also seeks to assimilate into white culture, emphasizing his speech and social status as signs of his integration. This duality creates a sense of internal conflict, as he tries to navigate between asserting his non-European glamour and denying his blackness to fit into society. Homi Bhabha's concept of the split subject, as discussed in Fanon's work, resonates here, highlighting the struggle of marginalized individuals to reconcile their identity with societal expectations. Othello's portrayal reflects the complexity of identity in a colonial context, where individuals are forced to negotiate between their authentic selves and the expectations imposed by the dominant culture. Desdemon's disobedience. Desdemona's disobedience and subsequent submission are complex aspects of her character that have been interpreted in various ways. Fiedler sees her power as a white witch, while Tannenhaus views it as the ability to speak the language of the law, which empowers her to give her own body in marriage. Greenblatt suggests that her submission to desire creates sexual tension in Othello. These interpretations suggest that Desdemona's actions are influenced by her shifting positions about Othello and the contradictions that arise from them. Cowick provides an insightful perspective by suggesting that Desdemona's love for Othello may be more about her attraction to the exotic myth of otherness than to the real man himself. This idea is supported by the popularity of travel books among white women, which often depicted exotic male figures as romantic heroes. This fantasy of the exotic other could have influenced Desdemona's attraction to Othello and her willingness to defy societal norms to be with him. Desdemona's attraction to Othello and her defiance of societal norms can be seen as a desire to break free from the constraints of patriarchal confinement. In a society where women's mobility and freedom were increasingly restricted, Desdemona's fascination with Othello represents a yearning for adventure, travel, and freedom, traditionally associated with male dominance. While Desdemona only invokes the right to owe a duty to her husband, not claiming autonomy, her actions still defy patriarchal control over her desires. Desdemona's eroticism, as depicted in the play, is particularly notable for its explicitness and frankness. She openly acknowledges the intensity of her passion and asserts her right to love Othello for reasons she deems valid. This overt expression of desire and her willingness to challenge societal norms make Desdemona a complex and compelling character, whose actions can be seen as a form of resistance against the confinements of patriarchal society. Tannenhaus' assertion that sexual relations are inherently political in Jacobean drama and that Desdemona's desire is politically subversive highlights the complexity of gender dynamics and power structures in the play. However, it is agreed with the discomfort regarding the intention to dissolve the sexual theme into other thematic elements. While it is important to contextualize sexual relations within broader political and social contexts, denying the specificity of sexual relations overlooks the unique dynamics and power struggles inherent in gender relations. As Gerda Lerner suggests, women's position in society cannot be adequately defined by simply approximating it to other social categories. Women represent a distinct category with its own complexities and power dynamics. While analogies to other power structures can provide some insight, they fail to capture the full complexity of gender relations in the Renaissance period. Active female sexuality, as depicted in Desdemona's character, disrupts patriarchal control not simply as a symbol or analogy to other forms of rebellion, but because it directly challenges the power base of patriarchy. Patriarchal control relies on the regulation and control of female sexuality, and Desdemona's assertiveness and desire threaten this control, making her a potent and subversive figure in the play. Desdemona's desire for Othello is indeed transgressive, particularly in the context of the racial dynamics of the play. Tannenhaus and Greenblatt's interpretations may not fully acknowledge the significance of Desdemona's choice of a black man as her lover and husband. Desdemona's explicit eroticism and sensuality, which are unique among Shakespeare's heroines, challenge societal norms and expectations, especially those regarding interracial relationships. Desdemona's choice of Othello is perceived as unnatural by characters like Iago and Brabantio, and even Othello himself seems to struggle with this aspect of their relationship. This perceived unnaturalness may also extend to the audience, reflecting the societal attitudes of the time. Desdemona's expressions of love for Othello defy these suspicions and stereotypes, challenging the audience to reconsider their views on interracial relationships and the roles of women in such contexts. Desdemona's boldness and explicitness in the Senate scene are indeed notable, especially given the societal expectations of women at the time. Her willingness to speak openly about her desires contrasts with Othello's more guarded approach. Othello's denial of the palate of my appetite suggests a sensitivity to the racial prejudices that may be directed towards him, as he feels the need to defend himself against any assumptions or accusations related to his race and sexuality. Desdemona's acceptance of Othello's sooty bosom without hesitation challenges the association of blackness with sexual lust and suggests her genuine love and desire for him beyond societal prejudices. The Senate's exoneration of Othello from any sexual slur and the declaration that he is far more fair than black can be seen as a symbolic recognition of his worthiness and acceptance into Venetian society, at least on the surface. However, this acceptance is fragile and ultimately proves to be superficial, as Othello's blackness continues to be a source of insecurity and conflict throughout the play. Desdemona's response to Othello's statement does indeed seem to reflect a sense of optimism and confidence in their relationship, contrasting with Othello's more apprehensive tone. Othello's desire to arrest the perfection of their meeting and his disbelief at actually possessing Desdemona may stem from his awareness of the challenges their relationship faces, particularly due to societal attitudes towards their interracial union. Desdemona's confidence and optimism may be seen as a reflection of her privileged position as a white woman, allowing her to believe in the possibility of their love growing stronger over time. In contrast, Othello's insecurity and uncertainty about the future could be attributed, at least in part, to his experiences as a black man in a predominantly white society, where his status and acceptance are constantly under threat. This difference in their responses highlights not only their personalities but also the broader societal dynamics of race and gender that shape their perspectives and experiences within the play. Desdemona's power, then, is the confidence of both race and class of an upper-class Venetian beauty, secure in the advantages of her position. She shares the confidence of Beatrice Joanna in Middleton's The Changeling. Desdemona's persistence on Cassio's behalf, for example, reflects an upbringing where women are taught that their power lies in their ability to cajole and chide men into favoring them. Her initial confidence in her persuasiveness and her methods, coquettishly insistent, owes something to the illusion of female power in the ethic of courtly love. This slowly gives way to the more sobering reality of the power of the husband over the wife, a power that Othello asserts despite his blackness, or is it because of it? Away from the world in which she has grown up, Desdemona becomes less assured and confident. Her transformation from a woman who confronts both her father and the Venetian Senate to a wife who submits to her husband's insults is not a result of truly feminine love but a manifestation of the contradictions imposed upon her by a racist, patriarchal, and bourgeois society. It is important, of course, to guard against reading dramatic characters as real, three-dimensional people. But, as Alan Sinfield says, Desdemona seems even more discontinuous than Othello because she is less a developing consciousness than a series of positions that women are conventionally supposed to occupy. She makes sense not as a continuous subjectivity but in terms of the stories about women that were and are told in patriarchal ideology. Female inconsistency, which I deal with at length in Chapter 4, is a complex amalgam of being scripted by men. The phrase is Sinfield's, not only in the plays, but generally in patriarchal society. Desdemona's obedience. Othello's relationship with Desdemona reflects a complex interplay of power dynamics. Initially, he values her speech and presence as they enhance his standing in Venetian society. However, as the play progresses, Othello's attitude towards Desdemona's independence changes. He becomes increasingly possessive and controlling, demanding that she speak and act only in ways that align with his desires and expectations. Othello's dilemma is not simply a generic male issue, it is deeply intertwined with his status as a black man in a predominantly white society. Desdemona's importance to Othello's position in this society makes him particularly susceptible to misogynistic ideas about women's fickleness and deceitfulness. This vulnerability is exploited by Iago, who uses tales of female infidelity to manipulate Othello's emotions and fuel his jealousy. Ultimately, Othello's struggle with Desdemona's perceived disobedience and the societal pressures he faces as a black man in a white world contributes to his tragic downfall. His realization of the limits of self-fashioning in such a society adds a poignant layer to his character, highlighting the complexities of race, gender, and power in Shakespeare's play. The intertwining of misogyny and racism in Othello's interactions with Desdemona and Iago's manipulation is a critical aspect of the play. Desdemona's supposed deception of her father, as suggested by Brabantio and later reinforced by Iago, serves to plant seeds of doubt in Othello's mind about her faithfulness. Iago's speeches, filled with misogynistic and racist undertones, aim to undermine Othello's confidence in Desdemona's love and loyalty. Iago's questioning of Othello's manhood is particularly insidious, as it not only challenges Othello's sense of self but also reinforces harmful stereotypes about black men's masculinity and sexual prowess. By appealing to Othello's sense of pride and masculinity, Iago manipulates him into believing that killing Desdemona is a justified response to her perceived betrayal. Desdemona, caught in the middle of these forces, becomes a symbol of the white devil in Othello's mind, representing both his desire for white acceptance and his fear of being emasculated by a white woman. This dichotomy deepens Desdemona's internal conflict, mirroring Othello's struggle with his own identity and place in a racially charged society. Shakespeare's portrayal of Othello's relationship with Desdemona explores the complexities of race, gender, and power, highlighting how societal prejudices and expectations can influence individuals' perceptions and actions. Greenblatt's analysis of Othello's vulnerability to Iago's manipulation through the lens of Christian guilt over sexuality is insightful, but it may overlook the profound impact of Othello's racial identity on his psyche. While Christianity undoubtedly plays a role in shaping Othello's views on morality and sexual guilt, his experiences as a black man in a predominantly white society also contribute significantly to his sense of self and his interactions with others. Othello's blackness is not just a superficial aspect of his identity but a deeply ingrained part of his history and lived experience. In a society where blackness is often associated with savagery, promiscuity, and other negative stereotypes, Othello may internalize these beliefs to some extent, leading to feelings of insecurity and self-doubt. This racial consciousness can intensify his feelings of sexual guilt, especially in his relationship with Desdemona, a white woman. Therefore, while Christian doctrine may contribute to Othello's feelings of guilt and conflict over his desires, it is important to recognize that his blackness is a crucial factor in shaping his psyche and vulnerabilities. Othello's struggle with his racial identity and its impact on his relationships adds a layer of complexity to his character and underscores the pervasive influence of race in Shakespeare's play. The imagery of black and white in Othello underscores Othello's internal struggles with his racial identity and perceptions of women. As Othello's status as an honorary white diminishes, Desdemona becomes symbolically black in his eyes, associated with duplicity and betrayal. This shift reflects Othello's deepening sense of alienation and disillusionment. Desdemona's white skin presents a complex challenge for Othello. While her beauty is enticing, it also represents everything he desires but cannot fully possess. This conflict is evident in his struggle to kill her, as he sees her potential to betray more men and feels compelled to act on behalf of all men, transcending his own racial identity to become a universal figure. However, her whiteness also reminds him of his blackness and the inherent limitations it imposes. Desdemona's symbolic role in Othello's identity is crucial. She represents not only his desires and aspirations but also the societal expectations and prejudices that shape his self-perception. Othello's contradictory feelings towards Desdemona reflect his internal struggle to reconcile his racial identity with his desires and the societal constraints placed upon him. Ultimately, Othello's necrophiliac fantasy to kill thee and love thee after encapsulates his profound inner conflict and the tragic consequences of his struggle with identity, desire, and societal expectations. In Othello, we witness a poignant portrayal of Othello's increasing racial isolation alongside the unfolding sexual tension. As his tenuous integration into white society unravels, he becomes more visibly alienated, highlighting his non-European past and pagan history. His isolation is palpable, particularly in contrast to his earlier confidence, as seen in the stark contrast between his presence in the Senate scene and his solitary state in the final scene. In the Senate scene, Othello is portrayed as a confident and respected figure, recalling his services to the state with pride. However, By the end of the play, he is a lonely and isolated figure, delivering a sorrowful monologue that stands in stark contrast to the confident man we saw earlier. Unlike characters such as Hamlet or Antony, who deliver eloquent eulogies, Othello's final words reveal a profound split in his identity between his Christian and infidel identities, epitomized by his reference to himself as a circumcised dog. Even in his recollection of a time when he felt a sense of belonging as part of us, his status as an outsider is ever present. The imagery of the zebra stripping off his mind, disintegrating into the polarities of black and white vividly captures the disintegration of his identity and his ultimate isolation. Othello's tragic journey underscores the complexities of race, identity, and belonging in a society that struggles to accept those who are perceived as different. Indeed, Othello's journey into isolation and tragedy is marked by his transformation into the murderer of his wife, a stark manifestation of the male-female opposition in the play. Emilia's powerful words highlight the predatory nature of men's relationships with women, portraying them as consuming and discarding women at will. However, simplifying this opposition between men and women would overlook the deeper divisions within both genders and the complexities of power dynamics at play. Even seemingly casual moments in the play carry racist undertones, indicating a broader societal context that influences the characters' actions and beliefs. The question of who represents the patriarchy or authority in the play is multifaceted, with characters like Iago, Othello, Brabantio, and the Senate each embodying different aspects of power and authority. The tensions between these characters reflect larger societal tensions around issues of race, authority, and gender. Iago's role as a mediator between the audience and the action, presenting himself as the voice of common sense, is crucial in understanding his character. He manipulates others by appealing to their preconceived notions and prejudices, making his actions seem believable and even justifiable. This manipulation extends to the audience, seeking their complicity in his schemes. Similarly, characters like Don John in Much Ado About Nothing use deception and manipulation to perpetuate stereotypes about women's deceitfulness, reflecting and reinforcing societal attitudes of the time. These characters challenge not only the moral fabric of the play but also the audience's own beliefs and prejudices, making them complicit in the perpetuation of harmful stereotypes. The performance of Othello in London's Barbican, as experienced by Ben Okri, highlights the play's ability to confront and challenge racial stereotypes. Okri's discomfort in the audience, where he feels singled out and observed due to his skin color, reflects the power of Othello's narrative to illuminate the complexities of race and identity. While some argue that Othello is not inherently about race, its history and cultural context have made it a play deeply entwined with racial themes. In South Africa, for example, the silence about racism in Othello can perpetuate racist ideologies, as it fails to address the realities of racial discrimination. Similarly, in India, where caste, regional, and class differences intersect with color prejudice, the play's themes resonate in complex ways. It is crucial to engage with Othello as a text that challenges and dismantles racist and sexist ideologies. By critically examining the play and its implications, we can confront the deep-seated prejudices and assumptions that persist in society, both in the West and in post-colonial contexts like India. As we conclude our discussion on sexuality and racial difference, gender, race, Renaissance, it's crucial to reflect on the profound impact of these intersections on our understanding of literature, culture, and society. Throughout this vlog, we've explored how concepts of gender and race were constructed and contested during the Renaissance period. We've delved into the complexities of sexuality and its portrayal in Renaissance drama, highlighting the ways in which these themes reflect and challenge societal norms. Our exploration of the works of Anya Lumba has shown us how literature can serve as a powerful tool for critiquing and reimagining the world around us. By examining the texts of this period through a contemporary lens, we've gained new insights into the enduring relevance of these issues. As we move forward, let us continue to engage critically with these topics, recognizing the importance of diverse voices and perspectives in shaping our understanding of history and culture. Thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and discovery.